Welcome to a football show, Monday edition. That is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Live, of course, at least me, one half of the show is live here in Dallas-Fort Worth at SEC Media Days as we've got talking season, Zach, underway. We are still a couple of weeks away, or I guess I should say about a week away from the start of Titans camp. So lots of SEC stuff today on the show and, of course, on Thursday as well. If any big Titans news breaks, of course, we will get that to you at some point during the show. You can also check out Football and Other F Words if you need some more Titan stuff this week, stackingtheinbox.com as well. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group. Zach, how are you, sir? What's up, man?
Doing good. Just chilling in Nashville.
I don't think either city, Dallas or Nashville, is chilling. I think it is hot as fuck in all of these places. Sorry to drop the F word right out of the gate.
Is that I'm inside at a cool 68 degrees, so I am, in fact, chilling.
Well, as am I. First thing I ever do when I get to a hotel room is I go to the temp and I drop that temp about 12 degrees, like right away. So
now, do you hack it so you're getting the actual temp that you want?
Meaning what I'm reading is not what I want, or did I just go lower than what I want in order to get what I want?
No, do you go into VIP mode and actually get it down? You can get it down to 65, which is actually 68 in a hotel.
Oh, well, I put it on 65. I put it on 65 no matter what, and then if it ends up feeling like 68 or 69 or whatever, then that's fine, I guess. But I immediately, first thing I do is crank the AC because man, it's hot in Dallas. I know it's hot in Vegas. It's hot everywhere right now, so I hope everybody's staying cool. I know everybody here at SEC Media Days are staying cool. We got a couple of great videos for you guys. I already had a chance to catch up with some folks, so we're going to talk some LSU football. Today, of course, is Ole Miss, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt's here, and South Carolina. I've had a chance to talk with T-Bob Herbert, who played at LSU, does a radio show down in Baton Rouge. You're going to hear a couple of minutes from him. I caught up with Neal McCready from rebelgrove.com, who covers Ole Miss, so we'll have a chance to hear from him a few minutes a little bit later on as well. And then Trey Wallace from OutKick, who talked Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia and all kinds of stuff, Ole Miss, Missouri. So kind of some quick conversations with some folks here in town, already starting to get the lay of the land here in Dallas as we welcome Texas and Oklahoma to the conference, which is really the thing that everyone is talking about right now, at least halfway through, day number one.
I like that Saban said that Texas ain't going to come in here and run the SEC. That was a great statement. Of course, I'm surprised that he got in because didn't he have credential issues to begin the day? I think is what Sankey said in one of the things, which was amazing. Could you imagine being the guy that stops Nick Saban from coming into SEC Media Days? Sorry, sir, you need your credentials.
I'm going to need some identification. Excuse me. Can you please show us your ID, please? No, it's funny. I was doing Feinbaum last week, and a bunch of callers, obviously Alabama haters, a bunch of callers were like, they were calling up and saying like, hey, I know he's still working for Alabama. Are you worried that he's like going to be spying on all these other teams? And I was like Kirby Smart and Lane Kiffin, like if they are talking to Nick Saban, it's on them to not give away the secrets. Like, it's not Nick Saban's job to keep Kirby Smart from saying something about
what about
it makes no
prior
sense.
SEC Media Days.
Well, they're saying because he's got access to practice now, and because of his game day role, like because he's on game day, and obviously, I actually walked into the main room when I got here. I had like a 5:30 flight this morning. Nashville Airport was atrocious, by the way. I don't know what was going on. And I get here, and Saban like kind of was walking in, like you said, had some of the troubles. He gets on set like right away, and it just hit me that because of his role on game day, fans are worried that he's going to be like spying for Alabama against these other teams. I'm like, first of all, Nick Saban is many things, but like a lying cheat maybe isn't one of them. Recruiting aside, of course, which doesn't count. But like he's not, if he's talking to Kirby Smart, like these guys all have their numbers. It's not like he wasn't talking to Kirby Smart or Lane Kiffin or Steve Sarkisian before. Like it's not like they don't know each other. And I was kind of surprised people were so worried about that. Oh, he's going to be at practice. He's going to get to talk to coaches. He's going to spill the beans and then help Kalen DeBoer. And I'm like, get out of here with that crap.
They're just already building in their excuses.
That's exactly right. Bo says TU already welcomed themselves. Bo, by the way, I was hanging out. I was hanging out downstairs talking with your guy Billy Lucci for a few minutes this morning. Very excited about this A&M team. So we can get into that when they go a little bit later on this week. But we can kind of look ahead at the week of action. Got some interviews for today as well that are already sort of tied into what we're doing today. Big day tomorrow, Zach, on Tuesday with Tennessee and Georgia, Missouri as well, and Oklahoma. So a big Tuesday on the docket here. Quickly, Sinkers Beverages. Sign up at the In Crowd. Sign up for the In Crowd. Go up there. East Nashville, best liquor store in town. I believe Tuesdays are the perfect day to go up there. They got like a discount special every single Tuesday, so make sure you go check that out. Bluegrass Beverages, their sister store up in Hendersonville as well. So make sure you sign up for the In Crowd. Bourbon allocations, all kinds of fancy stuff. They're always putting up new products, like whether it's a cocktail drink or a non-alc or whatever it is, they're always trying to put new stuff out. So just swing by and check them out. Sinkers Beverages, great sponsor of this show, and we do appreciate their support making this whole trip happen. So thank you to Sinkers Beverages. Kingston Group as well, buildkg.com. All right, Zach, you get to be the interviewer here. So where we starting off today here? Day number one.
Let's start with Greg Sankey's opening comments. I mean, his I guess you would call it the inaugural speech of 2025 SEC Media Days. I mean, was there anything to glean from it? Anything that stands out that people need to know? Or is it just like blah, 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 same old, but now we have Texas and Oklahoma?
I think a lot of it's propaganda. It almost always is. And he always spends a lot of time talking about like, oh, look at the student part of the student athlete. And here's all the accomplishments in sports other than football. Like he has to do that stuff as the commissioner of all the sports. Obviously, football makes all the money and makes him as powerful as he is. I thought it was interesting that he went political about 2/3 of the way through the speech. He sort of started talking about Democrats and conservatives and this moment in time in our country. And I was chatting with some of the folks from the league office, and I was just like, do you guys feel sort of compelled as a major, like powerful, like power is not the right word, as like a major sort of institution in our part of the country, did he feel compelled to try to say something? Because like it was a good, smart message, which was trying to tamp down, temperatures and hey, we're all more alike than our politics makes us out to be. Obviously, this is all completely new in his speech based on what happened over the weekend with Trump. And so I thought that was interesting that he decided to do it. He didn't say anything particularly special other than like, hey, when you go to a college football game, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are. You're all sitting there cheering for the same thing. College football brings us together. It was it was fine. It wasn't anything special. But I do find it interesting when an organization feels the need to comment on stuff like that, because I don't know about you, Zach, but I looked at the internet this weekend and I said, none of you need a take. If you're a social media manager, don't post. If you are a barbecue joint, don't post. You don't have to have an opinion. If you're a human being in this country, log off. If you're going to make it about you, no one cares about what you have to say about whatever the hell is going on in our country. You don't have to have a take. So I find it interesting when an organization feels the need to actually feel like they have enough power to say something. And so in that sense, I thought it was an interesting strat. And they were like, yeah, we feel like it's kind of like the NBA having to say something or the NFL feeling the need to say something. It's like you're such a big part of society and culture that you sort of do need to feel compelled to do that. And I think Greg Sankey did a pretty good job of that today. But I thought that was an interesting decision by the SEC. So,
yeah, it is pretty interesting. I agree with you. I made no comment whatsoever and will not make a comment whatsoever to the masses of Titans Twitter. I mean, they can barely handle Tavondre Sweat clips. They definitely cannot handle political takes. So I think I'll just avoid it. Because really, how are my words going to change anything in anybody's opinions at this point? Actions speak louder than words. Why ever I encourage, no matter who you may vote for, to get out and vote. And
yeah.
I think that is, and vote locally, vote nationally, just vote. And that's my overall takeaway. That's my political stance is takeaway. And everybody sucks. I mean, I think that's pretty much. It's my take on men and women. All men are stupid. All women are crazy. There's just different levels to it. And that immediately goes into politicians, where all politicians are stupid and crazy. And they're just, different levels to it.
Yeah.
So I do find it, I agree with you, always find it interesting because, typically in something like that, you may see NFL teams all send out the same generic message. And I mean, I like I said, I wasn't really paying too close of attention, but I do find it interesting the SEC that decided to do it. It's just random
I think
and weird, I feel like.
Well, so every now and then, because clearly it was like Sankey prepares his speeches well in advance, like all of them, whether it's the SEC media days or not. He's well known for sort of like how like written out he does this stuff, and it's clear that was added probably on the flight here yesterday or something like that. But I think it's a Greg Sankey. From what I understand, it's a Greg Sankey decision. So it's sort of a personal. He says, "Look, we are the SEC. We're an important cultural thing. I'm the leader of the SEC. I feel like it's important to deliver a message that like tells everyone to chill the fuck out." And like that's basically what he did. And so I think it's right. At first, I was listening and I was kind of going like, "All right, we're gonna do this. Like we're here to talk about depth charts and defensive lines and the playoff and Texas and Oklahoma and like argue about so much football stuff that's new that I was kind of like, okay." And then I always think about, because I've had enough conversations with Greg Sankey over the years to be like, all right, he knows that he feels something important, that because his position carries weight and messaging does matter in this country, that he feels compelled to say something about sort of like, hey, I think we can all get along here or whatever. So I thought it was at first I was like, this is so ridiculous. And then I kind of thought about it and was like, all right, you're the SEC. You're a pretty big, important thing in people's lives. To tell everybody to kind of calm down a little bit, I think is probably the right message and the right tone. So good for him, if he feels compelled to say that stuff. Well, you on Twitter, not you personally, but you on Twitter, or you, all our great audience members, or me, our opinions don't matter at all.
So Texas and Oklahoma, probably one of the bigger talking points. What is the I think the most interesting piece being talked about Texas and Oklahoma, and what's the one topic about Texas and Oklahoma that you're like, can we please get another thing to talk about?
It's already life in the SEC. Like, oh, they don't know how hard it's going to be. It's week in and week out. And what's really funny, my favorite part of that is watching Shane Beamer, for example, today, and he did a pretty good job of it. Brian Kelly as well. I've seen those two players. Lane Kiffin has not, as of time of taping, Lane Kiffin has not gone yet, and neither has Clark Lee. What I find interesting is how the players are a little smoother. Like everybody ties themselves in knots to do the whole like SEC is by far the best. This is a different deal, y'all. But Texas and Oklahoma are also elite programs and have played in big games too. Like they like, you can see the brains try to like they know that they've got to not turn it into bulletin board material or whatever happens in July. And so it's so much fun to watch, because I talked to all six players so far and was watching the coaches, and they're always asked the same question. Hey, what do you have to say to Texas and Oklahoma and how difficult the schedule is going to be in the SEC? Like, it's the same question already. I'm already tired of it. But watching them try to toe the line of these are the best venues with the best fans and the toughest teams and the toughest schedules. But also we have a lot of respect for Texas and Oklahoma and what they've accomplished. And like, you can see you can see them trying to clear their throats in real time, which I enjoy, because it's like you're trying to send a message without sending the message. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, it's just fun.
Yeah.
The players are already, the players are great. Like here's the other thing that they're all being asked about. They're all going to be asked about this video game. Everyone I've talked to so far has been asked about the video game, and they all have a lot of things to say about it. And I don't think people realize the video game is not as popular as like people realize. so I don't know.
Well, do you think, let me ask you this. Do you think it's because that now a week out from the game being released, Arch Manning's like, yeah, I'm getting paid $50,000 to $60,000 while you guys got paid $600. And I'm already a prima donna and I haven't even started yet.
Look, I'm a big believer in you are what the market decides you are worth. And Arch Manning is worth a lot more than the average person in the game. If I'm Texas, I'm Steve Sarkisian, and I'm assuming he'll be asked about this week. If I'm Texas and Steve Sarkisian, all I need to do to recruit is put down the video game with my starting quarterback on it, and then put down an iPad with the commercial with my backup quarterback promoting the game, and just be like, you want to come to Texas? Come to Texas. And I don't know what else you need to say in a recruiting pitch at that point, honestly. So it's.
But I mean, is it because of the $600 and the free game that they're getting that's not enough, or
Why they're being
what is
asked
it?
about it?
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
no.
or no,
It's
why it's not as popular among
it's not an international video game. I just meant from like a business standpoint, and people don't know this. I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
you. Madden will sell more versions of. I guess it'd be 2025 Madden. I've been told that Madden will sell more versions of Madden 2025 in a week than the number of EA Sports 2025 college football games are sold the entire year. So
you said that all the athletes were getting talked about. Then it's like it's not as popular as what you may think, and I'm thinking that that lets me. I mean, I get what you're saying now, but I wondered why maybe you made it sound like the college athletes weren't very happy the game was coming out.
Then I probably should restate that. No, they are all like they're being like Harold Perkins, who's an elite linebacker for LSU, who's played edge rusher as a freshman, off ball a little bit more last year. He was asked like 2 questions in a row, and it was like, where do you prefer to play at LSU? And he didn't really give an answer. And then it was, where do you think you will be successful in the NFL? Which is a very interesting answer if you're a Titans fan and you're picking in the top 12, for example. Where do you think you are best suited? Like, is it an inside backer? Is it an off-ball edge rusher? Like, where do you? And he didn't really give an answer. And then the third question was, where are you going to play yourself in the video game? and his face like lights up, and he like changes, and his whole demeanor changes, and he's like, oh, I'm playing everywhere. I'm gonna play D-line. I'm gonna play safety. I'm gonna play linebacker. I'm gonna move them all over the field. And every player is really excited about playing as themselves, like in the video game. But I just find it interesting that it has such an outsized, the game itself has such an outsized place in college football and in SEC fans and in like our media, even and Twitter, even. And that it's just not like, it's played in like United States and a little bit of Canada, and that's about it. It's not really played in Europe. It's not really played like FIFA and Grand Theft Auto and Madden. They're sold all around the world. And so it's just not nearly as popular as like internet conversations make it out to be, if that makes sense. But the kids that's going to be a thread the entire week. Every kid's going to be asked about, are you excited about seeing yourself in the video game? Like every kid's going to be asked that. And who would say no to that? Like,
right.
I made myself every year. Like, what are you talking about?
I like that they asked, where are you going to play yourself in the video game? Because it's kind of like, well, maybe that will give you insight onto what he thinks of himself and what he's planning to, do. It's such a kind of like a trick question that he's like, no, I'm going to play myself everywhere. Which I would love to just watch a stream of him having to play like a whole game with Harold Perkins out at cornerback and make him do it and see if he can do it. Like that to me would be some good content. I don't watch other people play video games, but I think I would watch that.
I would love to watch the players play like as the other guy. Like I want to see like a Texas player play as like Texas A&M. You know what I mean? Like I want to see Nico play as Georgia. And how would he attack himself? that's what I want to see. But no, the Texas and Oklahoma is going to be every player's been asked about that. And welcome to the SEC, which they actually, sadly, they were asked all that last year, and they weren't here. At least they're here now, and we can actually ask Oklahoma and Texas questions. But no, the other one is I had a chance to talk to Alex Huntley, and this is up on the YouTube page as well. I'll post a lot of players' videos on YouTube Shorts and on the Instagram page as well, so check those out. But I asked Alex Huntley, like, what's the biggest difference in his life from like beginning as how is college athletes' lives different today than versus, because he's been around 5 or 6 years now at South Carolina, and he talked about regular stuff. He was like, oh, I've got a routine now. It's so much easier because I know what to expect, and blah 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 blah. You don't react as much to stuff, just sort of regular maturity things. And then he did like a whole minute on NIL. And it was just like, NIL's changed the game for everybody. You see an 18-year-old driving around campus and he's got this really expensive car. And you're like, whoa, what have you accomplished? And like, I've been here 5 years and I don't have that car. But he kind of couched it with, things are different. Things have changed. I'm rooting for everybody to get theirs. If you get some money because you're deserving and you're worth it and you're a young kid and you've got NIL, then great, go for it. I'm happy for you. So he gave a really smart, kind of interesting answer about it. I asked him, I wanted to know broadly, and I'll probably be asking this of everybody I kind of get a chance to, is like, how is your life different as a college athlete today? Like structurally, what's your life like? I'm just interested. And I think for him to not even go to anything else other than NIL, I think was telling, right? He went right to NIL, and that was kind of it. So I think that'll be interesting to kind of track, and I'll put that together probably by the end of the week sometime. So interesting stuff there.
Well, speaking of videos that you maybe will have on YouTube later,
will.
you got 3 videos, Trey Wallace, Neal McCready, and T-Bob Herbert, who I thought you were having a stroke when you sent that to me initially. I was like, does he mean Bob Herbert, Tom Herbert? And I was like,
a bear.
And then when you sent the video, and I see what T-Bob did not look like what I thought he was going to look like when you sent me the video. So it was very jarring, to say the least, to match the name to the face. But I mean, he was great and everything. But let's start. Do you want to start and set up the Trey Wallace video?
Let's start. So Trey Wallace from OutKick, he covered Tennessee for a long time up there in Knoxville. He's been around the SEC for a long time. Again, these are pretty short, couple of minutes each, but I had a chance to talk to each of these guys. We'll talk to Neal about Ole Miss. We'll talk to T-Bob about LSU, but I had a chance to sort of kind of preview Tuesday's action and preview the week of action. Asked Trey Wallace a little bit about Tennessee, being who could overachieve, Tennessee or Alabama. Talked a little bit about Georgia, a little bit about Ole Miss and Missouri as well. So real quick conversation here with OutKick's Trey Wallace. All right, Trey, we haven't yet heard from Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia. Those are 3 big ones, of course.
Yeah.
Who has got a chance, and maybe Georgia's not a part of this, Alabama, Tennessee, let's say, who has a chance to overachieve more based on preseason expectations?
Oh, man. I mean, with the new coach at Alabama, Jalen Milroe, I think people are still talking about them fighting for a playoff spot. I think with the first year with Nico at Tennessee, I think folks are kind of trending that 8-win, 9-win type of ordeal. I could see them actually overachieving and be, because I expect Alabama to do this with Milroe. With Nico, we only got a bowl game, so we really don't know what to expect from him. So with the wide receivers returning, offensive line, running backs, I think Tennessee has a better opportunity to overachieve just compared to where we were at last year.
And Georgia's is it Georgia, Texas on your ballot right now, or are you going to change by the end of the week?
No, it's Kentucky, number 1. I think it's Georgia right now. I think it would probably be Texas 2. There's a way to throw in Missouri at 3. I know it's a little interesting potentially, but I think it's going to be Alabama at 3, and then you kind of go from there and down on. I think Oklahoma probably comes in around like 9 or 10, which is going to shock Sooner fans, but just chill out, just enjoy the year.
Well, I was going to ask you, Missouri and Ole Miss seem very similar. Returning quarterbacks, returning coaches, offensive schemes. 2 teams that are normally not in this position, but preseason top 10-ish.
Yeah.
Better talent on both teams than you expect. Which one of the 2 do you like better? And obviously you're very high on Missouri.
I like Ole Miss, and it's not because of the hype, and it's not because of what they have done, especially in the offseason. I think Kiffin's actually building something at Ole Miss. He's doing it in a different way that's pissing people off, in a sense. But I do think Ole Miss right now is kind of a little bit above edge for Missouri. I know I said Missouri 3, but I could switch Ole Miss and Missouri right there. Quarterback situation, I like them for both teams. Running back is where it gets interesting for me for both. So right now, I think Lane Kiffin and them have the opportunity to be a playoff squad. It's how far do you get after being in that first round of the playoff? It's going to stand out, because if he flails out after the first round, then all of this is for nothing.
So basically, all those questions tell me that you don't think Alabama is going to be as good, because you said Tennessee could overachieve. You got Missouri and Ole Miss potentially in the top 3. You got Georgia, Texas in the championship. What?
I think the stark reality is this could be a 9-3 season for Alabama, and that's not a bad thing. I look at the schedule. I think there could be 3 losses in there, and we'll see. I want to see what they look like on defense. I want to see what it looks like on 3rd and 5 on a defensive call. And Saban's not involved, and Kalen DeBoer. It's not that I don't think Alabama has the talent. You look at Alabama's roster; they had the talent. I want to see how they react to a new coach and how a new coach handles this scheme and the way things are going to play out compared to what Nick Saban did. Because we could always go back and be like, okay, Saban was doing this, this, and this. We trust him here. What's Kalen going to do? That's what I'm figuring to me most.
And that was Trey Wallace of OutKick. The one thing I kind of noticed about Trey's answers to your questions, and I want to it's like one overarching thought with a lot of thoughts that tie into it. But is everybody seems to agree it's Georgia 1, and I would say everybody tends to agree Texas number 2. But nobody agrees who number 3 is. And he first off says it's Missouri. Well, then he says it's Alabama. And then later on, he says Alabama. It's stark contrast. I think it's going to be a stark reality of 9-3. So how does 9-3 become number 3 overall? And then he loves Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss is not this. And it's just, there seems to be whoever the third best team in the SEC is, seems to come with the caveat of, yeah, they're probably the third best team, but I could also see about 4 other teams be the third best team. Is that the general consensus so far? Like, you all go through and vote, right? And do all your wins and losses and everything. It's going to be a shit show, right? Like, when they start calculating all the stuff, it's going to be a shit show.
And Shane Beamer today was up there at the podium going like, look, I know y'all have a job to do, and y'all are probably going to pick us 14, 15, or 16. And so this will be the first year where we have to go 1 to 16. So that's the first time we'll ever do that, which is interesting. And it's funny you bring it up, because my biggest takeaway from talking to everybody so far this morning and with Trey, I think it's going to be 1 and 2 is going to be very clear. I actually, to your point, I think it's wrong. I think the fact that Georgia's going to be number 1, they're going to be picked by everybody to win. But I think coming into this, and maybe I could be wrong, I'll be interested to see what more conversations happen throughout the week. I think Texas is penciled in by almost everybody at number 2. I don't think that's right. I think it's Alabama. Right now, if you told me, and maybe I change my mind by Thursday when we vote, but right now, if you asked me to fill out my ballot right now, it would be Georgia, Alabama, 1 and 2. I think Texas is very, very good. I think they're capable of winning a national championship. But I think everybody's going to get a loss. And I think A&M is going to beat them at the end of the year. Texas. I think A&M wins that game at home. Too much emotion in that game being played for the first time in 15 years. I think Texas A&M is going to win that game. So I think Texas is 10-2. I think Alabama might be 10-2. I think Georgia might be 11-1. I think everybody's going to have an extra loss. But I agree that there's no consensus around 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I feel pretty good. I feel really good, actually. And it will be. Here's what I'll do. I'll give you like what I'm going to project my picks to be right as of right now, and then I think we'll do it on Thursday when I actually give you my picks, and this is what I officially wrote down or whatever. Right now, my ballot will be Georgia 1, Texas 2. Georgia 1, Alabama 2. Sorry, it'll be Texas 3, Ole Miss 4. It will be Tennessee 5, Missouri 6, LSU 7. A&M 8, Oklahoma 9. That's probably my order right now. But I think A&M and Oklahoma are a step back. I think LSU is sort of in the middle somewhere. I think Missouri's got a chance to be very good, but I think Tennessee's a little bit better. I think the top 4 get into the playoff, which is Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss. I think those are the 4 that get in. I don't know if I'm going to change that from what unless I learn something from somebody.
Change it. I'm just curious. What would make you change it as an analyst from Monday to Thursday when there's no games played? like you know what I'm saying? I'm just curious. What would make you change that?
There are a lot of SEC Media Days is almost as much about off the record conversations as anything else. There will be a lot of brisket and bourbon and beer tonight and tomorrow night and the next night, where we all are sitting around, and sometimes it's with somebody that is inside of the SEC or inside of the programs, or sometimes it's just an analyst that I really, really trust. Ian Fitzsimmons, for example, is a good friend of mine. He lives here in Dallas. He does ESPN radio, but he knows more about everything in college football than almost anybody I've ever met in my life. And I could talk to him and be like, what did Shane Beamer tell you yesterday? And he'll be like, here's my conversation with I wanted to know about Shane's quarterback situation, and he told me that this so-and-so is not ready yet. None of that stuff will get to air. Like, none of that stuff's allowed to be aired, but you can have a lot of those conversations. And so I think you just sort of, you find the people you trust, and I hopefully bring the people that we trust. I hope to try to bring those guys on the show and on the platform as much as possible. And you guys know who they are. They're the same ones that are on SEC Football Live, and they're the same people that I trust. But you just have a lot of conversations, and you kind of rethink things. And I like to come into it kind of clear and say, all right, here's what I think, but I'm gonna let other people's opinions kind of. I'm gonna soak in them a little bit, marinate. Like a nice.
So if we see Alabama dropping your rankings, you heard something that was like, and you don't have to tell us what it is, but obviously you heard something pretty big that changes what you view maybe a game or two. Maybe it's not necessarily about Alabama, but maybe it's something you heard about Tennessee that drops Alabama a loss and then moves Texas up, something like that. You've heard something that makes you think that Alabama is going to at least have an extra loss, and even the extra loss you're kind of baking into the equation.
That's about right. And also I try to come into it with my personal opinion, having studied the teams and doing the anonymous coaching scouting reports for Athlon, and you try to do your best to kind of get the best guess. But I also try to come up with something that's different than the group think, because the group think is all going to go one way, and they're going to get some things right, but they always get something wrong. And so I try to come into it like it's like multiple fresh slates. Like I have my own opinion that needs to stay where it is in its own little silo. Then I need to go, okay, what are we getting wrong? And then I need to go, all right, what have I learned? And then you kind of put those three things together, and at the end, I put my vote down. And sometimes it's gut feel. Like I have a gut feel that Florida is going to be a little bit better than I think. And I've already talked to 4 people today, 3 of whom are like, "You're wrong, dude." And I'm like, I don't think so. So sometimes you kind of just are stubborn and you stick with what you've got. And one of these guys lives in Gainesville, went to Florida, played football at Florida. And he's like, yeah, I think you're wrong. I don't think, and I trust him pretty well. So I'm rethinking. All right, I got to rethink Florida a little bit more, maybe refocus, restudy, whatever. So I think Trey's very good. So
what do you think of Trey's 9-3? Like the stark reality of it all is 9-3, and because you're a 10-2 guy, and it doesn't sound like a one game is a big difference, but in the world of college football, it kind of is, right? It's not like you're choosing 11-6 and 10-7. You're choosing between that 9-3 built-in bowl game win, right? Like, wouldn't that?
No, 9-3, 10-3
wrong.
10-3 with a bowl win is
10-3 with a bowl win.
Honestly, this is one of the most enjoyable parts of SEC football this year, in my opinion. There are probably 8 or 9 teams that are on paper from a talent standpoint good enough to play in the playoff, to be a top 12 team. Some of them have schedules that are way too. Oklahoma has a schedule that is way too hard for them to finish at 10-2. So they're going to be 8-4 probably, but they're really like a 10-2 team from a talent perspective because their schedule is so much harder than Texas's or Ole Miss's or Missouri's. So what I'm getting to here is Georgia's Georgia, and then there's like 8 teams where like half of them are going to be really excited about their team because they won that one game and made that one play and finished 10-2. And then there's going to be the other half. My opinion is Missouri, Tennessee, LSU would be my vote, that are going to lose that extra game, that are going to be 9-3, and that aren't going to be as excited because they missed that one chance, that one game. And that is the margin we are talking about in the conference now. When you have this many good teams with this many good quarterbacks and 12 slots in the playoff, we are talking about a drive, a play, a third down, a field goal that could cost Alabama a trip to the playoff, in which case they're probably good enough to win some games in the playoff. Or they lose that game, like let's say it's at LSU or something, right? They lose that game, all of a sudden they finish 9-3 and they're out of the playoff and it's a failed season. But we could be talking about one field goal, one drive. And so my instinct is Tennessee's not quite good enough yet to get there because Nico's young and inexperienced and the secondary's bad. The defense for Missouri's got to be replaced. I'm not sure how they've got an easier schedule. I don't think LSU has the talent on defense either. So if you're asking me to like err on the side of which are disappointed, it would be LSU, Missouri, Tennessee, and which ones are excited, it would be Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss. Those are if you're asking me where the margins are. So I don't really disagree with Trey, but I think Alabama is closer to 11-1 than they are as maybe to 9-3 if that's
9-3. Okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean their schedule's so. I mean, Bama's schedule is really hard. At Oklahoma at the end of the year is like their 5th most important game. Like it's not. It's really hard.
Speaking of Oklahoma, I kind of agree with him that I think it's like Oklahoma's on the outside looking in its first year, and you should just be okay with that if you're an Oklahoma fan.
I agree.
You know, do you think that is the general consensus down at SEC Media Days? That's like 9 or 10. That's Oklahoma. Maybe some people have Texas A&M behind Oklahoma. I don't know how how the SEC Media Days group tank is or think tank is thinking on Texas A&M. But it seems to me, I would think Oklahoma would be about the 9th or 10th best team. I thought that was a pretty spot on assessment.
Yeah, I think they'll finish 8th if you're asking me to project. I would have them at 9. But I do think the top 9 are kind of separate. This Bo will like this, but I would have A&M ahead of Oklahoma based entirely on schedule. I think the coaching is fairly comparable. I think the talent is fairly comparable. Quarterback play equally talented and comparable. Offensive line questionable, maybe a little bit of an edge to A&M. I think the schedule is the difference here for Oklahoma. Oklahoma could be 7-5, Zach, and be one of the top 20 teams in America. Like that's how hard their schedule is. They play everybody with the exception of Georgia. I think they got to do everybody. They got to play Texas. They got to play at Missouri. They got to play at Ole Miss. They got to play Alabama at home. They play Tennessee at home. Like they play 6 of the top 7 teams in the conference. They play all of them. And so I just think it's more about the schedule for Oklahoma and some of its timing. Like they replaced all 5 offensive line starters. Not a good year to go to the SEC when you do that. You want to be Texas when you're bringing back all 5 starters or 4 out of 5 starters other than Christian Jones, basically, and you have one of the top 5 offensive lines in America and a quarterback returning. Like that's how you want to go into the SEC. So I think Oklahoma is going to have a tough year.
All right. You want to set up the Neal McCready clip here?
Yeah, so Neal McCready's Rebel Grove is the website. He covers all things Ole Miss. He's been covering them for a very, very long time, and I wanted to get his sense of just where this roster is under Lane Kiffin, how they built it, where they're better. Are they actually the best roster that we've ever seen at Ole Miss? And then, of course, I love getting into the mind of Lane Kiffin, and I asked him a little bit about sort of what makes Lane Kiffin different, what's different about him that people don't really fully know. He's around him a lot. So here was my conversation with rebelgrove.com's Neal McCready.
All right. So, Neal, from a roster standpoint, you look at what Lane Kiffin's built in the offseason. We all know the experiment they're trying to run. Relative to the rest of the teams he's had, how much better is this Ole Miss roster truly than everything he's had, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's his most talented roster at Ole Miss. There's no question. They've got very few holes in it, really. I think, they had that game at Georgia last year that was an eye-opener for them. I don't think it was revelatory. I just think it confirmed what they sort of suspected, which was they simply had to get better on both lines of scrimmage, and that's what they've done. At least in terms of on paper, on the roster. They went out and really bolstered their offensive line through the transfer portal. They added Walter Nolan, Princely, Iman Mielen, and others on their defensive line. They're bigger, they're deeper. They should be, just able to hold their own against the elite of the SEC on the lines of scrimmage much more than they've been able to do during Lane's previous seasons at Ole Miss.
When you look at Lane personality-wise, he might be wired in a way to actually manage, sort of like, I don't want to call it a rental because that seems insulting. That's not my intention, but he seems like he's sort of wired to handle all of that. What is it that people don't know about him? Like the outside fan it's not around him like you guys are. Like what is it that you would like them to know about Lane Kiffin, the personality, that maybe people don't know?
Yeah, he's much more serious and reserved in real life than he is on Twitter. On Twitter, he kind of has a little personality that I don't think is really reflective of kind of his day-to-day operations, certainly not the way that he sort of runs his program. His program has a lot of confidence, which I think you see that in Lane. There's a certain swagger to it that I think you see with Lane, but it's also a real workman-like kind of blue-collar approach that I think would surprise people. They don't assume anything. They put the work in. They have a system that they believe in, and they're pretty consistent to it. And it's nowhere near as flashy and all that on a day-to-day as kind of think you see on social media. It's a go to work, put the work in approach that you probably see at a lot of successful programs around the country. And they do a lot of stuff that I think draws kids' interest with social media and that stuff. But look, at the end of the day, it's a football program, and that's how he treats it. I mean, he's the son of a football coach. The late Monty Kiffin, who just passed away last week. I mean, Lane learned a whole lot about how to run a program from his dad, and his dad was a get the work done kind of guy.
One word: do they make the playoff this year?
I don't know. I mean,
That's
look,
3.
Here's the one thing I will tell you. It doesn't matter what I think. They think they're going to make it. And so if they don't make it, it will be a monumental disappointment inside that building.
Couldn't pull the trigger, could he, on whether or not they're going to make it? Do you think that's the reality of the situation of what Ole Miss? Nobody just knows what they are, or do you think that's like, we've seen this story before, we get excited and then they can't win, these big games? Like, is it a little bit of both? I mean, why couldn't he really just say yes or no in your mind?
I think because this experiment's never been run before in college football, which is like trying to rent a roster to close the gaps between a middle recruiting program, Ole Miss, and an elite recruiting program like Georgia. And Lane Kiffin said it, what Neal was referring to was after Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss lost to Georgia pretty handily last year in Athens, Lane Kiffin was at the podium and he said, "I don't have enough 5 stars." Like, he just said it, and we're like, "Oh, thank you, Lane, for being honest." And so they went out and bought 5 stars because they knew they had a quarterback coming back in Jackson Dart. They knew they had a chance with the 12-team playoff to push all the chips to the middle of the table and try to go for it, quote unquote, which that happens with the Eagles in the NFL. Like, the Titans can push all their, like, you can't do that in college football, but with the new rules, you kind of can try. And so this is an experiment that we've never run before, which makes them maybe the most interesting team, with a coach who has his own gravitational force as an interesting character in this whole story. Their schedule sets up really well. They don't have to play, like, I think they play LSU at home, they play Oklahoma at home, and they play Georgia at home. And I think they have to win like one of those games, and they probably will win everything else. Like, their schedule is really good. And so it's sort of like now or never for Lane and for this experiment and for Ole Miss and for the quarterback. Like, it's just a good time for them to do it. And everyone agrees. And I've talked to a lot of folks already about this and before I got here. The biggest difference in Ole Miss and, let's say, like, even Tennessee or Missouri, they've got a pretty good defensive line. The front 7 talent at Ole Miss is different than it's ever been before on defense. And so if that works and it hits all those quote unquote rentals, that's where they could be extremely dangerous because the schedule sets up and Lane's interesting. I've talked to Chance Campbell about this before, actually, and I think you and I have talked about this. Lane is, like, when he was on the Titans last year, I asked him about this. Like, I try to tell people that Lane Kiffin is not the Lane Kiffin you think he is. Like, I think he has, like, social anxiety disorder, and, like, I'm sure he's down there right now giving a speech.
You never mentioned this with Chance Campbell, but you did mention it when we were talking about storylines of the SEC or who we would want to see in, like, a documentary. And I said I would be very interested to see Lane Kiffin. And you're like, well, the personality and all that kind of stuff. That's when you recently said it. I don't know if you said it to Campbell or not.
I asked Chance about Lane last training camp, before the roster cut down, and I was in the locker room and I asked him. I said, "What is it about Lane?" And this, I think, it wasn't like on the record, but it wasn't off the record. We were just kind of chatting, and I was like, he's way different than people think, right? And he was like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "Give me something people don't know." It's like, he just, like, after work, he, like, goes and does yoga and then he goes home. Like, he's not like this. The flashy Twitter troll is not who he is. And I've seen him give speeches at media days, which, again, I think he's on the podium either right now or in a few minutes. Like, that's not his comfort zone. Like, that's not where like, some guys get up there and they're like Shane Beamer's like, yeah, throwing zingers, and he's a spokesman, and he's, like, fun and interesting and charismatic. Lane Kiffin's not that, which is, to tie it into football, I think it is an interesting personality to manage what they're trying to do from a roster standpoint. So if you're Brian Callahan for the Titans, you have to be able to manage, and it's a little different with 18 to 22-year-olds, but you're bringing in all this new stuff, right? And your job as the head coach is not only to design great plays and to develop a technique, but it's also to communicate with 53 guys and get everybody onto the same page. In college, you don't normally have to deal with that as much because you've recruited people to be in your facility, and you sort of have, like, I don't know what the right word is, like vetted them, for lack of a better term, before you offer a scholarship. And one of the biggest problems with the portal and NIL is that we just don't know how all these pieces fit together, and you sort of need the right personality type to manage all of that stuff that now happens in a college locker room. And I think Lane Kiffin is uniquely qualified to manage that. I think Josh Heupel is wired in a way that he could do it. Maybe Sam Pittman at Arkansas could do it as well. I don't know if he's going to get a chance, but like from a personality standpoint, it sort of takes someone that's just like honest. And I think in personal relationships, I think Lane Kiffin is very honest with his players. And I think he's just sort of a guy, and he's not this.
Well, it also sounds like he's a very, I always knew that he's very cerebral, but it sounds like he's really about putting in the work. And I think that works because he's kind of a team made up of free agents, right? He's got veterans.
Yeah.
And Mike Vrabel probably works better with veterans, for instance, than maybe rookies. And really that may be bad because I think most veterans that came in that were free agents kind of liked him at first, then grew not to like him. But either way, you look at it, it's like there are certain coaches out there that do better with veterans than they do with rookies. There are certain, whatever. And it's just interesting because of all the reputation Lane Kiffin has had as multiple stops before he got to Ole Miss, is a guy that really on the surface didn't seem to take the sport of football seriously, but the sport of building college football relationships with his players. And that's what it looked like from the outside looking in because of all the stories that you heard and all this and that. And maybe some of this social anxiety that you speak of plays into that. And it's really interesting to see that he has matured and grown into something that the jokes really don't land as much as they probably would 5 years ago. Like the jokes are a little outdated at this point.
Yeah, I think so. To that point, I think one of the two narratives that are around him, he can't win the big, like, oh, he's just too much of a goofball to win the big one. And that, he's too immature and all this Joey Freshwater stuff. And I don't think that either of those apply anymore. Honestly, I don't. I think he's evolved and changed into himself. I think he's more comfortable in his own skin. But I also think the reason they have lost games, like when you change expectations in college, like you're a victim of your own success. Like the fact that Ole Miss fans are going to be pissed that he almost went to Auburn and only won 10 games last year is ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous. If you're going to fault him for not beating Georgia and Alabama last year, which he didn't, you also have to give him the credit for bringing the entire program up a notch. And so, like, I don't buy. They lost to Alabama and Ole Miss and Georgia last year because they didn't have good enough players, not because Lane Kiffin. Like, I know that the popcorn thing happened on CBS, right? Get your popcorn ready, and then they got smoked by Alabama. That's because Alabama's really effing good. Like, they have better players than Ole Miss. Like, it's not. They should beat Ole Miss. So I don't think it's he fails in big games. I think it's just he saw where his team could go. He maximized it. Then they said he went to his boosters this offseason and said, give me some better players. And they went and bought a bunch of really good players. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a positive way. Like, these guys deserve their money. And they built a really, really talented roster with a good schedule and a playoff that's now 3 times as large. It's an experiment that they're trying, and we've never seen it done before. So I'm fascinated to see what happens. My gut is that they go 10-2 and they sneak in as like a 10 seed or an 11 seed. That's my guess.
That'd be fun to watch. I think.
Yes.
I think the playoffs are fun with Ole Miss in there.
Ole Miss at Penn State with James Franklin versus Lane Kiffin. Are you freaking kidding me? That would be unbelievable theater. Yeah, it'd be great. No matter what happens, we win.
All right, we got T-Bob Herbert next.
Okay,
so,
okay. Hang on.
T-Bob.
T-Bob A-Bear.
A-Bear?
A-Bear. T-Bob A-Bear, like Bobby A-Bear.
Oh, okay.
I think Bobby A-Bear's his uncle, actually. All right.
Why they put the T in front of Bob so they can tell them apart?
Maybe the T-Bob I can't explain. I can explain the A-Bear part. This is a Louisiana boy, played at LSU. I think he played on the 07 national championship team as like a young pup, I believe. One of the funniest dudes you'll ever be around. Great guy and very, very well connected. Does a radio show on ESPN in Baton Rouge. We talked about LSU's upside, their playoff expectations by the fans. So if you want a quick little primer here for LSU, here was my conversation with T-Bob Herbert.
All right, for fans that don't know LSU, that don't cover LSU, that aren't around LSU, they're SEC fans, what is the thing people need to know about the quality of this roster and where the talent is relative to expectations?
I think that, in terms of the roster, offensive line, I think unbiased, probably the best in the entire country. I mean, their left tackle, Will Campbell, is number 1 on the Athletics draft big board, and he's not even 21 years old yet. It's going to be his third-year starter there, third-year starter right tackle. Where O-line's incredible. I really believe in Garrett Nussmeier, the quarterback. Wide receiver group, unproven, but a lot of talent to throw against the wall. And then defensively, a lot of question marks, but you spent about $10 million this offseason remaking the defensive staff. Okay? And at most position groups, I feel like you're going to find answers. The one Achilles heel is the interior defensive line, where they didn't have bodies. They missed on some transfer guys. So it's kind of a hodgepodge unit. But we had Brian Kelly on this morning, and he went out of his way to basically kind of stump for his D-line and say, look, it's going to be better than people think. So we'll see.
If you're talking 9-3, 10-2, but they missed the playoff, how do fans react to that outcome of the season? But Nussmeier's clearly the guy. Like, they solved some problems, but maybe don't reach the playoff.
I think an eternal college football truth is 10-3 with a bowl win, right? So 9-3 regular season, but you have to win that bowl at that point. That's going to keep the majority of fans happy. Of course, there will always be people who fall on either side, but 10-2 would be an unqualified success. And I kind of think with how this new playoff works, we'll see if this bears out over time. I think 10-2 would almost guarantee you a playoff spot. So it's like I look at Tennessee, Mizzou, LSU, maybe Ole Miss as these teams that are all in that range. They all, when you look at their schedule, they all look like they could be 9-3 or 10-2. And who manages to get over that? I don't know why that hump is so hard from 9-3 to 10-2, but it is. And whoever manages to do that, make the playoffs, and if you make the playoffs, so then I think your fans are going to be happy no matter what. So yeah, I think the goal is the playoffs for Brian Kelly, but 9-3 would not be like an abject disaster. 8-4, and then everybody's going to be, burn it all down.
So what do you think of that? Because obviously you asked that question with the intent of, getting his opinion on the team and getting his opinion on the fan base, but he kind of flipped it as an eternal college fan base truth. And I don't know if that's the case for every program, but I think maybe a large chunk of programs it could be the case for. So I kind of agree with it. But this is Brian Kelly and LSU where the standards are different.
Yeah.
And not so long ago, they're competing for a national championship, and they hire Brian Kelly to take him back to that. An incentive-laden contract for 10 years, $95 million, and they haven't really, truly been a playoff team, and they haven't really sniffed the playoffs, and last year may have been their best shot, and they still couldn't get it done. Do you think fans are going to give them a grace period?
So I think your point about expectations vary from program to program is an important one to remember. I think that's absolutely correct. So LSU eventually not okay with 10-3 and barely getting into the playoff. Eventually they need a championship. Again, the last 3 coaches who have coached at LSU have all won a national championship, and 2 of them were complete morons. The other one was Nick Saban. So if 2 morons, and not just one moron, but if 2 morons can win national championships at LSU, then
why not a third?
Brian Kelly should be able to. You're dead wrong about Brian Kelly, but that's okay. They had 10 wins in each of the last 2 seasons, and they would have made the playoff maybe last year. I don't know about the first year because I think they ended up finishing 10-4 or something like that. But back to how Ole Miss is built. LSU should be built the way Georgia and Texas and Alabama build themselves, which is mostly through recruiting. And for whatever reason, I think they're. I had a chance to talk with Garrett Nussmeier today. I think he's going to be really good. The quarterback for LSU. I think the offense is going to be really interesting. They hired Blake Barker, the defensive coordinator from Missouri. I think the defense is going to be better, but they're still trying to portal it. Like LSU is not a portal team. You can grab a great player or grab a great safety or grab a great corner, one or two, but that LSU needs to be built through recruiting. And Kelly has sort of been building the roster through the portal the last couple of years until this past recruiting class, which is now all loaded with in-state Louisiana players. So fans are happy about where they're at, knowing that this is an outside chance at a playoff spot. The schedule's not terrible for LSU, but I think they're more, again, in that same exact group of teams where the one play on the one drive in the fourth quarter where they lose makes them 9-3. And I think T-Bob's wrong about LSU being okay with 10-3 forever. I don't think that's the case. I think most programs that's the case. I think with LSU, 10-3 is fine.
Seems like a Memphis fan base. Like Memphis would be very happy with 10-3.
Yeah. Kentucky, even frankly Missouri, and that's not trying to be disrespectful, but like 11-1 playing for a national championship is different than 10-2 and sneaking into the playoffs. So I think LSU could absolutely sneak into the playoffs. I think a lot of things have to go right for them. I think the quarterback has to hit. The two coordinators, the new coordinators have to hit. The defense has to be significantly improved. Portal players have to be great. They do have, and he's right about this, they do have one of the 2 or 3 or 4 best offensive lines in America.
For sure.
No question about that. And so that helps, right? Having a really great offensive line with a dependable quarterback who's going to know what to do with the ball. I think they're going to be really good. And here's the other thing about LSU. No one has talked about them and nothing has happened to them in the entire offseason. And I think being that quiet in Baton Rouge is a good thing for LSU. I think it's a good thing. It's like, remember Texas A&M last year with all the noise? That was clearly a precursor of the controversy and the culture problems at A&M. Right now, everybody's on the same page in Baton Rouge. Everybody's in the same boat, pulling the same direction. It's very quiet in Baton Rouge.
Does Garrett Nussmeier have to be what Jaden Daniels was last year with a worst receiving core for this team to find success? I mean, it seems like there's a lot. I guess let me rephrase it. The receiving core, the more experienced receiving core is gone, and obviously ultra talented LSU receiving core. The offensive line is better. The defense is probably worse or maybe the same.
Probably better.
So, but you think it's better with the defensive line not being as good as what it was last year, even though it wasn't really great last year, but the talent was there?
So Titans fans will understand. If you have the best offense in like the history of your school and the worst defense in the history of your school, statistically, the odds are your defense is going to get a little better and your offense is going to get a little worse. I think that's fair. I think that's the fair way to look at. They're just too imbalanced last year. Again, literally the greatest offense in school history and literally the worst defense in school history. There's no chance.
Do you think they're more balanced this year then?
I think it's more balanced. The question is ultimately, does that lead to a playoff spot, or does it keep them kind of treading water? And I think I'm more in the 9-3 treading water, still very good, but not. They don't have like a transcendent. They're very good at running back. They're very good at offensive line. People in Baton Rouge love Joe Sloan, the new coordinator, who's one of the 2 guys that they elevated. People love that guy. They put a great defensive coaching staff together. It's the best coaching staff Brian Kelly's ever had. They went and got Texas's defensive line coach, and they went and got Florida's secondary coach, and like got the band back together kind of. So I think LSU's really dangerous. I like Tennessee a little bit more, and I think those are the 2 teams that are challenging with Missouri. I think those 3 are challenging to get into the playoff, and I would guess, having not spent the week here yet, that those 3 are the 3 that are just barely on the outside looking in, like 9-3. 1 game cost them, and those 3 are on the outside looking in. I could be convinced otherwise this week, but I think right now I'm like Tennessee 5, LSU, Missouri 6 and 7, and those 3 are they're like 14, 15, 16 in the standings. You know, like they're just outside the playoff.
Yeah. I want to ask you 3 questions that kind of all relate to the future of LSU. How important is it that Garrett Nussmeier is the guy, or at least shows that he is the guy to help them at least next year? How long before 9-3 doesn't cut it, or missing the playoffs doesn't cut it anymore?
Yeah.
And at what point do you expect that the recruiting actually kicks in for this team? Like, I know you said they had a really good recruiting class now, but like, does going local and diving deep into local actually yield wins? Like, when does all this stuff come to a head where like, what if they're 8-4 this year, but Garrett Nussmeier is the guy? Is that fine?
That's kind of like what I was asking him, right? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
you learn. I think Garrett Nussmeier is
like Will Levis, right? Like, it's like, okay, if Will Levis is the guy, but it doesn't yield the wins because of other things, you're fine for next year. But this is Garrett Nussmeier season 4, even though it's technically season 1 as a starter, but season 4 of Garrett Nussmeier. And it's then going to be heading into season 4 of not living up to really taking the expectations of LSU and putting it pen to paper in a playoff spot.
I think Garrett Nussmeier will absolutely be the guy. I think he will prove that. I think he'll prove that very quickly. I think he's going to be in complete control of the offense. I think he's a very good player. Is he like a top 5 quarterback in the SEC? Probably not, but that's because it's loaded, right? Jackson Dart, Brady Cook, Nico, Jalen Milroe, Carson Beck, Graham Mertz. Like, it's so loaded with quarterbacks this year. I think he's going to be very good. I think he's the guy, and I think people are excited about him throughout the course of the year and going into next year. I think this year it doesn't matter. It's not the right phrase, but there's no pressure on Brian Kelly right now. All the pressure will be on them next year if they go 8-4. If they're 9-3 and they barely miss, people are going to kind of be like it'll be uneasy, but it's not going to be like hot seat stuff at all. I think you don't give him personally. I don't think you give Brian Kelly enough credit for what he's accomplished so far, because I think the roster and what Coach O left with like covering up sexual assault and like all this other like really awful stuff at LSU. I think Kelly had to come in and like do some house cleaning a little bit, and to win a division, beat Alabama, and then win a Heisman in your first 2 years and win 10 games both times, I think is a pretty good testament to what he's accomplished. But eventually you need to do better. So like, I think he's got this year.
Especially because you're a coach that's never done better, right? I mean, like, he's a coach that's made the playoffs, but his team's kind of sucked, or they were out of their league or outmatched. Like, he's never won a big championship with a big program.
Yeah, he's the winningest coach in Notre Dame history, which is a pretty big statement considering the coaches they've had. But yes, he's never won the championship, and the reason he left, it's actually very similar to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, right? What did Lane Kiffin say after the game? We don't have enough 5 stars. We don't fish in the same pond as Georgia and Alabama. Brian Kelly at Notre Dame didn't fish in the same pond as Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State. And that is why he left for LSU, was to fish in that pond, which means he needs to start fishing in that pond. And last year he did. This past recruiting class where he dominated in state, went into Texas. They got one of the best classes they've ever had, like elite recruiting class. Those guys aren't going to help him win right now. It's going to take a year or two. So he's got to do another class. They need to be good this year, close to the playoff. Nussmeier has to be the guy. He has to continue recruiting great, and then it all needs to kick in next year. I think that's sort of like where you're going with this, right? Like what needs to happen? Yeah. That would be sort of my guess.
I mean, how long does all this take before anybody can say either he did what he set out to accomplish or he's kind of failed at LSU? I
still think there's another year or two, but I just think Brian Kelly is a very, very good football coach. Like, sometimes he can just make a guy better, and I think that's what we saw in the first 2 years. And he needs better ingredients. Like, now they need the dudes that are not Ole Miss guys. They need LSU guys. And that's not a knock on Ole Miss. That's just sort of, what Lane Kiffin was talking about last year. So I think this will be one of the most unprecedented and wild and most exciting college football seasons we've ever had in the SEC. The top 8 or 9 teams could be great. And that doesn't include Florida, Auburn, or Kentucky, who all could be pretty good too. Like, it is nuts looking at these schedules, and it's gonna be a lot of fun though. So Otherwise, I'm going to try to get you guys. And if you want, I don't ever do this, but if you want to tweet me or in the comment section of this video at Braden Gall or in the comments here, if you want to ask for if you have requests from media members, if you want me to try to go have some conversations with some folks about your team or whatever, don't hesitate. At Braden Gall on Twitter, go for it. Jump in there and do it. I'll see what I can do to try to go make that happen. Some folks are here for all 4 days. Some folks aren't, but I'd be happy to try to do that if y'all have requests. So we'll make sure to try to do that for you for Thursday's episode. I should be bringing you like a whole lot of stuff on Thursday from a lot of the teams that we're going to see. I've already got Georgia stuff lined up and Tennessee stuff lined up. So going to be a very interesting week with Texas and Oklahoma. Other than that, Zach, what do you have for the good folks on Stacking the Inbox and F Words coming up?
I'm in the midst of writing a big, long piece. I'll probably be out Wednesday on Jamal Adams. And there were some surprising statistics that I found out about Jamal Adams last year. There was some interesting stuff after we broadcast. I listened to OTP, and there was interesting stuff about his injuries and all this kind of stuff. So I'm kind of like taking all of these thoughts, looking at his 2023 and kind of projecting out, maybe I was like low risk, low reward. I'm kind of like low risk, medium reward. And I think that probably is the actual truth, because there's people out there who think it's low risk, high reward. And I think that those people are a little crazy, but I don't think it's as bad or as perplexing when you start diving into maybe some of the advanced details of what this could mean for the team. Yep. And that's what I'm trying to do. Unlike Big Mike, who's been blocked by Big Jeff for his comments on Jamal Adams, I have not been.
Oh my God. Yes. Low risk, medium, some reward. I think that's about right. All right. So Thursday we'll have our official SEC predictions. We'll have a bunch more videos from a bunch more folks for you guys. We'll have them all posted out there. If you want to catch the players' videos, of course, those will be posted in the shorts section of the YouTube page. So make sure you check those guys out as well. They're the most interesting part of this whole thing. They're fascinating. They're smart. They're interesting. They have the best answers and interesting perspectives. Like I love talking to the players. They're the best. And of course, Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group, we appreciate their support, of course, through all this trip here to Dallas-Fort Worth. I'm gonna eat some brisket and eat some other barbecue, maybe get some Tex-Mex, who knows? But other than that, please support Sinkers Beverages. Join the in crowd. Bluegrass Beverages. Join the BOB program. Join those two programs. Their customer rewards programs. They will take care of you. I promise. On Tuesday, if you're listening to this, go in on Tuesday to Sinkers. You'll get all kinds of discounts and stuff on I think there's wine discounts and beer discounts. So check out Tuesdays. And then, of course, buildkg.com for the Kingston Group is the website. So stackingtheinbox.com on Substack. You can also get to Lower Broad Hockey if you want to join the hockey community that we put together there as well, covering the Nashville Predators. Other than that, all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network, Paul Karski Podcast, the Hot Read Podcast, Music City Audible, Football and Other F Words, on and on and on we go. Club and Country, Gold Standard, you name it, we got you covered. So thank you guys for watching and hanging out. Thumbs up on the YouTube page. Share, rate, review, subscribe, all that great stuff, of course, wherever else you get your podcast. We do appreciate you hanging out. For Zach Lyons, I am Braden Gall. We will talk to you guys on Thursday.